Enron was an energy company that was extremely popular in the early 2000s. In fact, they were said to be one of the highest earning companies in the country. But what most people didn't know is that that was far from the truth. Enron was founded by a man named Ken Lay, who combined two energy companies, HNG and Internorth, into one to form Enron. At the time, it was an energy trading company and was practically the only one in the country, so Enron was largely in control of the price of energy. After several years of doing very well financially, Enron got quite greedy and started charging more for their energy. This happened several times until an article was published asking if Enron is charging too much for energy. Also around this time, Enron's stocks were doing surprisingly well, nearly $100 per share. The reason for this, though, is that Enron employees, specifically Ken Lay and Jeffrey Skilling, started to sell their shares. Combined, they sold 17 million shares and earned $1 billion. This catches the eye of one employee named Sharon Watkins, who brings up the topic of some accounting irregularities to Enron officials. The information is ignored by Enron, but soon after, Jeffrey Skilling resigns after selling $60 million in Enron shares. This makes people question Enron's stability, and the stock prices plummet dramatically, eventually to 26 cents per share. It is at this point that Enron declares bankruptcy. Andrew Fastow created something called SPEs, or Special Purpose Entities, in order to put Enron's debt in other companies so that the public would be less suspicious. Once Enron declared bankruptcy, Andrew Fastow was indicted for 78 cases of fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and insider trading. However, in order to get a shorter sentence, Fastow agreed to spill some information that he knew about Skilling and Lay. Lay and Skilling were then indicted for many cases of falsifying records, insider trading, and self-dealing. Andy Fastow, after serving 5 years in prison at Federal Correctional Institution in Bastrop, Fastow continued his life and began working as a document review clerk for a Houston-based law firm. He also went around to businesses and told them how to spot money fraud. Ironic, I know. Ken Lay died of a heart attack in 2006. And as for Jeff Skilling, he is said to be released in February of 2019, when he will be 64 years old. Enron originally had no intention of becoming what they ultimately became. They just wanted people to have energy, and it just so happened that they were pretty much the only energy company in the United States, which they took advantage of and ended up being consumed by their own greed, which led to their downfall. It's like the Monopoly experiment. For those of you who don't know about this experiment, the basics are that there were 2 test subjects at a time who would go in a room to play a game of Monopoly with each other. But the experiment designer rigged the game so that one person is guaranteed to win pretty much no matter what. As the game goes on, you can see the predicted winner gets more cocky and confident and loses touch with their sympathetic and empathetic sides and begins to act unnatural. The other player, the losing player, fairly early on realizes that they are going to lose and wish to quit early since they know that they are destined to fail. This experiment shows how power and money can affect people and their behaviors regardless of who they used to be and if they know each other. The social perspective of Enron. There were around 20,000 Enron employees at the time of its bankruptcy, and all these people were just normal people who have kids and families to feed and provide for. However, most of them had no idea that Enron was in such bad condition, since Ken Lay, Jeff Skilling, and Andy Fastow were very secretive about the company. That would have led to an even earlier bankruptcy, which no company president would want. The workers also got to brag to their friends that they worked at Enron, which at the time was the 7th most popular company in the United States. Enron does a good job of showing how just because something seems normal or okay does not mean that you should trust it. Take the Milgram experiment, for instance, which took place in 1963 at Yale. In the experiment, people in lab coats told test subjects to ask other test subjects who were actually paid actors, to ask them factual questions, and if they got the answer wrong, they would be shocked with increasing intensities of a shock, starting at 15 volts and going up to 450 volts, which is enough to kill someone with. The learners were separated from the test subjects, so they could not see each other, but they could hear screaming or pain from the other side of the partition. The results showed that a vast majority of the test subjects were willing to go up to lethal amounts of voltage because a man in a white lab coat told them to. This experiment was trying to show how quickly people can turn evil or obey instructions that are inhuman or inhumane. This correlates to Enron perfectly because Enron officials were kind of like the people in the lab coats, where they were asking random strangers to do certain tasks without realizing what they were really doing. They were acting like robots, just obeying commands and acting like what they were doing was okay, when in reality, they were doing something very wrong. Another social experiment that relates to Enron is the Stanford Prison Experiment. The basic idea of that one was that there were several college-aged men who were asked to be a part of this study about prison behavior, and they were all assigned randomly to either be a guard or a prisoner. For the experiment, they built a simulation of a prison, and they put both guards and prisoners in there practically alone with very little supervision, but they had placed cameras all over the place and watched to see what would happen. What ended up happening was that the people assigned to be guards took advantage of the prisoners in horrible ways. They would taunt them, tease them, shame them, beat them physically, torture them, and just be horrible in general. The test had to stop early on accounts of being unethical, but it showed the general public what people can become when put in powerful positions. This is what happened to Ken Lay and the staff of Enron. They were placed in a powerful position and took advantage of their employees, but did not tell them everything that was going on. The cultural perspective of Enron. At Enron, greed was portrayed as a virtue instead of a negative value. They looked for people who were greedy to earn the most money. This is why Jeff Skilling became the president of Enron, because people knew that he had groundbreaking and new ways of making lots of money for Enron. So what can we learn from Enron? We can learn that often if something seems too good to be true, it often is. We can learn that it is important to ask questions and not just to follow blindly, even if it is for some popular company that supposedly makes billions of dollars. As a matter of fact, Enron's slogan is "Ask Why," which is very ironic. We can learn to always ask ourselves whether what we are doing is right or ethical. We can learn that if things seem secretive or if there is something that people are hiding from you, it is probably pretty bad. Lastly, we can learn that power and money can corrupt people, and that we should always make sure that no one person has too much of either because horrible things can come from it. Thanks for watching.